welcome to Ag PhD. I'm Darren Hefty.
And I'm Brian Hefty. Thanks for joining us today. You know, spraying season is right around the corner. In fact, it may have even started already on your farm. So we wanted to discuss today some of the things you throw along with your pesticides, namely spray adjuvants.
Well, that's nice, Brian. You can spray everything you want, but if you have iron deficiency chlorosis, you may not get any yield out of your soybeans. We're going to talk about IDC and how you can overcome it in your fields.
Well, speaking of no yield, if you have our weed of the week, you might be faced with no yield. So we're going to talk about how to control this tough weed. But first, here's this week's Farm Basics.
Farm Basics is brought to you by the Liberty Link trait and Liberty herbicide from Bayer. The most reliable weed management solution, Liberty Link and Liberty herbicide are the link to efficient row crop production and sustainable weed management.
During our Farm Basics time today, we wanted to talk about the impacts of last year's drought. And you know, I was just saying before the show to Darren, I think in town, most people who are non-farmers have long forgotten about this drought we were dealing with last summer, but the effects on the farm economy and on farmers, it's going to last for years.
Well, it may not look so droughty right here because it's a little sticky in the shade right next to the trees, but you get out in the field, and we've still got some powder all around on our farm. And when you dig down in the soil deeper in the subsoil, that's where farmers are really concerned, that much of that subsoil moisture is gone. And coming into this year, we're really going to be relying on catching some spring rains.
Well, you talked, Darren, about in this ground where we're standing right here. This is actually Darren's blank slate field. And what did you get here last year in this drought, Darren? 10 bushels, 20 bushels of corn?
Well, it was a little better than that, but it certainly wasn't what I was expecting. It was maybe a half a crop. And you know, that's going to happen from time to time. There's going to be a tough year with drought that's all you get. But, you know, fortunately this year we've got another chance at things, and farmers are pretty excited that, you know, hey, last year's done, that's in the books. Now we can put in this year's crop. However, there are still some lingering effects from last year's drought.
Well, there are. Before we get to that, I just wanted to mention, though, one of the things we talk to farmers a lot about is drought-proofing their crop. And like on Darren's ground here, he's only had this field for 3 years, so we haven't had enough time to get it into the kind of condition that we would like to get it in. All the ground we've been farming long term, that raised a considerably better crop. So it does make a difference if you treat the soil right, but you can't just do it for a year or two. This is one of the big things we talk to farmers about. It's a long-term process. And that's why I say, too, the impacts of 1 year's worth of drought, it does affect farmers for a long time. In part, like Darren said, we've got depleted soil moisture. It takes a little while to build that back up sometimes. Other impacts could be, well, we had very little residue out on the surface of the soil, so now we've maybe depleted our organic matter a little bit in the soil. It might take a few years to build that back up.
That's true, but the other thing I look at, Brian, is just what happened last year and how it relates to this year. When you look at seed prices, for example, seed prices are up. Guess what? Many of the companies producing the seed last year, they had drought too.
Yep.
So they didn't get quite the yields they were hoping for, so they had a little less yield, little less supply. Well, that means there's going to be a little higher price. And demand was really strong last fall for seed. Farmers were concerned that, well, I had trouble in my fields, I better buy my seed up because they probably had trouble too.
Yep, well, another impact is when the supply is down, that means commodity prices go up. And so all of a sudden people start thinking, oh, I need more for rent and I need more for the chemicals that I'm selling and seed and fertilizer and everything else. So all these companies are trying to raise prices on farmers. And you know what? The farmer didn't really have a lot of total dollars that he could afford those higher prices. Plus, for the next year, for the 2013 grain marketing year, the prices were $2-3 lower at the time. And so you say, boy, this is a lose-lose situation for me as a farmer. That's no fun.
Well, it isn't, but let's not get all negative here. You know, we're excited. We've got a new crop we're going to be putting in. We've got high hopes that we're going to have a great crop this year. You know, we had drought last year, and there are a number of things that we suffered with, you know, because of that lack of moisture in our fields. But as we get some spring rains and as we get some rain in the early summer, things will get back to normal here and everything will be fine.
Yeah, and when you look back through history, typically following a drought year, there is not just a normal year, but maybe even a little bit above normal in terms of crop yield and everything. So those are all good signs pointing towards this coming year.
And it could be an even better year if you control our weed of the week. Can you identify this week's weed?
For lower cost, higher production, Mandaco Agri leads with versatility unmatched. Twister is the vertical tillage unit for no-till as well as conventional tillage. Twister's ease of maintenance is forgiving in rocks and has contour conformity equaling zero downtime. Our hydraulically adjusted coulter angles make residue management easier, less costly. Spring or fall, the Mandaco Twister vertical tillage unit is the new leader. See your Mandaco Agri dealer. Visit northcountrymarketing.biz or call.
You can't fill a barrel any fuller than its lowest stave, and your crops can't do any better than the nutrient that's in shortest supply. Your yield potential is only as good as the weakest nutrient in your fertilizer program. Give your crops more than just NPK. Prescription apply all the micronutrients your crop needs, each one customized for your crop's potential. MicroLink, linking yield to potential.
In the world of four-wheel drive tractors, there is no name more powerful than Steiger. The newest addition to the powerful Case IH Steiger line is the Steiger Rowtrack, available at Titan Machinery. Designed for row crop use, the Rowtrack provides more maneuverability and reduces compaction while maintaining power and performance. It's available with 16, 18, or 24-inch tracks for row spacing as narrow as 20 inches. Visit your Titan Machinery dealer today to learn more about the Case IH Steiger Rowtrack. Titan Machinery, better solutions.
Honey Wagon? Can the sweet talk. Out here we treat manure, and when we talk treats, we don't mean cupcakes. Treating manure with More Than Manure Nutrient Manager can reduce solids in your pit or lagoon and ammonia levels in confinement buildings. PU, try N and P. MTM is the first and only nutrient manager proven to reduce nitrogen loss and phosphorus lockup. That's fertilizer loaded with yield potential. Looking for proof? Check the bin. Isn't that sweet? Results you can't ignore. A pit you finally can.
For years, FarmLogic has been the easiest and most convenient way to keep up with your farming operations. Well, it just got better. Introducing FarmPad for your phone. You always have your phone with you, so entering records as they happen is as easy as a touch of a button. Chemical database, GPS, service records, and more. When you do it on the farm, save it on your phone and it's backed up forever. Call or visit farmlogic.com for a free trial and find out why FarmLogic is the best decision tool for the farm.
Iron deficiency chlorosis is one of the worst problems you can get in soybeans. So today we wanted to talk about what the problem is exactly, why it's caused, and what you can do to solve this issue on your farm.
Well, when you look at soybean fields, sometimes you'll see yellow areas out in the middle of a green soybean field, and you think, what's going on in that yellow area? When you look closer at the leaves and you see yellow leaves that still have green veins, chances are you could be looking at iron deficiency chlorosis.
The reason why this happens, everybody always used to think, oh, it's just high soil pH. And yes, you need to have high soil pH before you probably have this issue. But what we also find is if you have high salt and high nitrate, it makes the problem even worse. And what it really comes down to, it's iron deficiency chlorosis is the name. It's not that the soil doesn't have iron, it's just that the plant doesn't get that iron in the right form, and so we end up with issues. It looks like we're completely short of iron in that area of the field because our plants have turned yellow. Well, we've got iron out there, we just need to get more, right, Darren?
Well, there's a few different things going on. First of all, if you've got high salts, you've got high nitrates, and you've got a rising soil pH, chances are you're looking at a drainage problem. And for many guys, they want to know, what can I do this year? And we'll definitely cover, what you can do this year, because even if you get drainage tile installed underneath that area of the field, you're not going to fix it in 1 year. It's going to take a few years to get that problem corrected. But that is the long-term fix, adding some more drainage tile. Now you may say, wait a minute, I've got pattern tile in my field, but I still have these spots here and there. That's very common and very possible in your case. What you need to do in those areas is just put your tile lines a lot closer. Maybe you have 50-foot spacings with your tile lines, or maybe you have 100-foot spacings. You may need to have 10 or 15-foot spacings in those specific spots in your field to try and get the water to infiltrate a little quicker and to try and cure up those problems.
Now the good news here is if you've got pattern tile out there and you're still having problems, that tells me you probably have really heavy soil. You probably have very good land. Okay, so that's great. And if you can just get a little bit more tile out there, long term, your prospects look great. I can't tell you how much it's helpful to start with good ground, because to build new soil takes a long time. Yeah, I know.
We're talking about my field here, because this field, before I purchased it, had decades of erosion going on. So there's virtually zero topsoil. So we're working on building that up over time. But the good news here, Brian, is I don't have any iron deficiency chlorosis in my field, at least.
Well, that's true. And you know, when you don't have iron deficiency chlorosis, you don't have a whole lot of worries yet, though, Darren. and here's the thing, when we talk about Darren's ground right here, he does have some high pH spots. So at some point, he could start to see some iron deficiency chlorosis. So yes, we're going to get some drain tile in and solve those problems long term. But let's just say that Darren planted some soybeans this year and he sees iron deficiency chlorosis. What can you do then at that point?
Okay, well, once you see it, you've already caused damage to your crop. And in our experience, what we've seen is, yeah, you can go ahead and green those soybeans back up, but chances are the yield damage was already done and you're not going to get those beans to yield the same as the beans that never turned yellow.
Right, so the reason why I bring this all up and presented it that way is we just want you to understand you can green your beans up. Go throw a whole bunch of iron out there. There are ways to do this.
Be careful about this whole bunch,
yeah,
Brian.
but I'm just saying some. You can do some foliar feeding and stuff and it'll green it up and you might get a little bit of yield boost. But Darren's point is you've already given up most of your yield. So what can you do ahead of time?
Well, what you need to do, if you know where those areas are, and chances are they're going to be the same spots in your field year after year. Maybe that spot grows a little bit and gets a little bigger, or maybe it contracts a little bit, gets a little bit smaller, depending on what the weather conditions are. But what you can do is put a product down like green bean or soy green right at planting in furrow. You can put these products down. They aren't cheap to use, and you're probably going to spend $15 to $20 an acre, maybe a little bit more depending on your conditions and how much of a rate you need to use. But you can put those products out and you can keep your beans looking good the whole way through. And we have seen some positive yield increases when we're doing that. Now, if you're doing that across the whole field, how much of an increase am I going to get? I don't know what your return on investment is going to be. If you had iron deficiency chlorosis spots on 50% of your field, I'd say your ROI is going to be great. If you said, well, I have 1 acre of IDC spots and I'm going to put these products on a whole 100-acre field, I'd say your chances of a great return on investment are probably pretty slim.
Well, if you want to step even further back than the day you plant, you can go back to when you selected varieties for your farm, which could have even been last fall. If you pick the right varieties, some varieties are very tolerant to iron deficiency chlorosis. The problem is if you're just picking IDC varieties, that's a much shorter list than if you didn't have IDC problems. My point is, get that drainage fixed, then you don't even have to worry about it. But there are good IDC varieties, and you certainly can use soy green or green bean if you want to solve the problem at planting time.
And all those fixes, if you have 10% of your acres with IDC issues, then you're probably going to get a decent return on investment more years than not.
Okay, so once again, iron deficiency chlorosis is not necessarily a problem with lack of iron in the soil. It's just when we add high soil pH and especially add high nitrate and high salt problems, now we've got an issue with not enough uptake of iron into the plant, or even if the iron does get into the plant, it doesn't end up in the right form and we've got a problem.
Well, soil conditions can keep getting worse if you don't fix them, and so can your weed pressure. If you don't wipe out our weed of the week, it can really spread. Can you identify this week's weed of the week?
There are more mouths to feed than ever before. What are farmers doing to meet the challenge? They're using agronomically designed equipment from Case IH. Our Quadtrac technology, soil management, and planting systems are designed to foster a better growing environment that helps farmers maximize yield potential. And our deep understanding of agriculture is preparing them for the challenges ahead. Will you be ready?
I'm ready.
Go to caseih.com to learn more.
You expect a lot from this seed, and as it grows through each stage of development, Agriculture Liquid Fertilizers is there, feeding your crop exactly what it needs when it needs it. So no matter how you fertilize, no matter when, AgroLiquid efficiently brings all the nutrients your crop needs for a great harvest. From 1 kernel in the ground to 600 on the ear. For better yields and better quality, Agriculture Liquid Fertilizers.
Back in 1966, Advanced Drainage Systems, Inc. was the first company to start manufacturing plastic agricultural drainage pipe in the United States. And today, ADS continues our leadership with superior pipe production and service capabilities. Our roots are firmly entrenched in the agriculture industry, and we're committed to helping farmers grow their business. With 54 manufacturing plants and 24 distribution yards throughout the world, you can count on ADS and our green striped pipe to be there when you need us. Advanced Drainage Systems, the green striped pipe you can count on.
Speed, strength, and efficiency make Capello corn heads a head above the rest. Built with polymer components that exceed industry standards, Capello corn heads continue to push the boundaries for maximizing grain retention while using less energy. Visit CapelloUSA.com and learn more about Capello's state-of-the-art chopping technology that cuts cleaner, allowing your horsepower to remain where it belongs, with your combine, so you can harvest faster in all weather conditions. Add to that an amazing folding feature, and it's clear to see why Capello is a head above the rest.
One of the biggest questions Darren and I get every year is, what should I use for spray adjuvants on my farm?
Well, and the other question of that is, Brian, why do I need all these spray adjuvants? Why don't they just put it all in the jug? Because a lot of guys say, man, I'm spraying Roundup. Chances are they could put an additive in there that I could use with just about anything.
Okay, so here's what it comes down to. In a lot of cases, they can't put the right adjuvants in there. There might be an antagonism issue. In other words, when they put a certain adjuvant in, all of a sudden, the product's not going to work as well. It's not going to store as long. There's some issue that way. And the other thing is, I don't want my adjuvants in because I need whole different adjuvants if I have had cool and damp days for a long time, as opposed to if I've had hot and dry days for a long time, and we'll explain that a little bit here.
Well, the other thing too, Brian, is if you've got different products, you have so much more flexibility when you don't put all the adjuvants in the jug. Think about all the things that get mixed with Roundup. It might be a herbicide one time, it might be a fungicide another time, it could be an insecticide. You just don't know what they're going to mix in there. So that's why Monsanto or the other companies making glyphosate, they may put some surfactant in, but chances are they're not going to put everything that you need to mix with that product.
Okay, the two major categories that we're talking about here when it comes to spray adjuvants are basically the nitrogen source and then the spreader sticker side. So let's get into that spreader sticker thing. And don't get me wrong, there are all kinds of different products out there. We're just going to talk about some base products, very simple, and those would be non-ionic surfactant, crop oil concentrate, and methylated seed oil.
Well, thank goodness, Brian. I was just thinking, oh no, we're going to have to name off about 100 different things here. And then the other side of it is a lot of them are combined. Oh, well, we want a high load crop oil with a little more surfactant in than normal. And there's all kinds of different things companies are doing. And that may be designed for one specific product or another. But the base products that we're talking about could pretty much be used with just about anything on the market. The labels are going to advise you which one is going to work the best with that particular product or with certain tank mixes. And when we talk about methylated seed oil, that's generally thought of as the highest grade one.
Okay, so something like a canola oil or soybean oil, that's going to be your methylated seed oil. And like Darren said, that is going to help get that product into the plant quickly. Crop oil concentrate is just a slight step down from that. And then you have non-ionic surfactant. Non-ionic surfactant, basically all that's doing is it's spreading it over the leaf and it's helping it stick on the leaf. It doesn't do a whole lot for penetration. With the crop oil and the methylated seed oil, they do quite a bit more for penetration. If you want to spray a herbicide onto a weed and it's got a thick waxy cuticle, how's that herbicide going to get in there? Without the crop oil or methylated seed oil, the herbicide might just stay on the outside part of that leaf and never penetrate, never get in and control the weed.
And there you can see why we have to know what the weather conditions are going to be when you're trying to spray in order to make a specific recommendation, and why on Ag PhD a lot of times we'll say, oh, use this product or that product for the weed of the week. But we don't always talk about what the additives are going to be, because it's going to be completely different in Alabama than it is in North Dakota.
Yeah, it could be surfactant one day, could be crop oil the next day, and it could be methylated seed oil on day 3. So we don't know, and that's why, like on our own farm, we try to have all 3 of those available all the time so we can tell whoever's running the sprayer that day, hey, make sure you're mixing this in with that particular combination.
Okay, now the other thing we talked about is the nitrogen sources, and typically there's liquid 28% or a liquid source of nitrogen, and there's also a dry like ammonium sulfate. Now many times you'll also have a third category of ammonium sulfate replacement products. So it's a low use rate liquid that's supposed to take the place of ammonium sulfate.
Okay, let's talk about the reason why people will throw ammonium sulfate with glyphosate, for example. Ammonium sulfate does a few different things. It's going to lower the water or spray solution pH, and that's a good thing. Roundup likes that. Not all products like lower pHs. If you want a little bit higher pH, you use liquid 28% instead. But the ammonium sulfate will lower the pH just a little bit. What the ammonium sulfate also does is provides a nitrogen source. The nitrogen is good for the weed and good for the crop. It helps the weed in that it helps move that herbicide more quickly to the growing point. It helps that weed speed up its growth. It also helps speed up the growth of the crop, and then you get a little bit faster recovery. And finally, the other thing ammonium sulfate does is it will help sequester hard water ions, things like magnesium and calcium that could potentially tie up the Roundup.
Now some products prefer to use liquid 28% with them. Maybe they like to have a higher pH in your spray solution. In many cases, that's where liquid 28% gets recommended instead of ammonium sulfate. The other thing is some farmers just refuse to use dry products like ammonium sulfate. They say, you know, I'm going to mix it in with water. I don't want to take a chance that I dump a whole bag in and it just ends up being one big lump that doesn't work.
What it comes down to is if you buy the wrong ammonium sulfate, there's a bunch of not very soluble ammonium sulfate on the market. But the bigger issue is just a lot of guys don't want to carry 51-pound bags. And I tell people all the time, why not? Get yourself a little bit of exercise every day. How many of those bags are you going to lug around over an entire day? 40 bags?
Well, hold on though. You don't even need to do that, Brian. Here's how I would do it. I would just set up a cone inductor, and your water source can pump right through that cone inductor, and there you go. And it'll go right up into the sprayer.
But anyway, the reason why we're trying to talk you into using ammonium sulfate is it's the best product on the market, and it's the cheapest.
Yeah, when you've got something that's the best and the least expensive, don't let something like, well, the bulk physical commodity of it is just so much for me, it's too much weight. Let's figure a way around that because you can save a lot of money and have better performance.
So once again, with those ammonium sulfate replacement products, they're not quite as good. And here's the other thing with them. They're really not true ammonium sulfate. They call themselves ammonium sulfate replacement products, but they don't do all the good things that ammonium sulfate does. Well, anyway, with this spray adjuvant talk, just make sure you're talking to your agronomist and make sure you're changing spray adjuvants. Depending on weather conditions, it does make a big difference.
And all those things make a big difference when it comes to controlling our weed of the week. We'll show you how coming up next.
The Weed of the Week is sponsored by the Enlist Weed Control System from Dow AgroSciences, a new herbicide and trait system that will build on glyphosate.
You work to protect your farm's legacy and to keep it going. Introducing the Enlist Weed Control System, an advanced herbicide and trait system that will build on glyphosate for exceptional control of tough weeds. The next chapter begins.
Our weed of the week is Lady's Thumb. Lady's Thumb?
Well,
what in the world?
I call it Lady's Thumb Smartweed. It is a member of the Smartweed family. But here's the thing, when you look at the leaves on Lady's Thumb, they have a purple imprint that looks like a thumbprint out on the leaf, and that's how it got the name Lady's Thumb.
Okay, let's talk about how to control this thing. Let's start in wheat. What do you suggest?
Okay, in wheat, I really like sharpen in the burn down with Roundup. You're gonna get a little residual out of the sharpen. Then you follow up in crop. Most guys prefer Husky, but a lot of guys lately have said Addition Broad Spec in tank mixes with Wide Match has done pretty well too.
Okay, how about in corn?
Well, in corn, I like Triple Flex and Sure Start to begin the program with. And post-emerge, most of the products do pretty good. Status, Callisto, Lotus, Impact, Bucktril, all good.
Yep, otherwise I think Verdict is pretty good pre-emerge as well.
And I like to mix a half pound of atrazine in with those post-emerge products. It does does add a little bit of control to the smart weeds.
Okay, and finally, soybeans. We don't have any Ladythumb that I know of that's resistant to Roundup or Liberty yet, but just in case we do, what are you going to do to stop it?
Well, I like starting out with a good pre-emerge program, and typically the Authority products are good. Authority Assist is probably the best, but that has Pursuit in it, and I want to save my Pursuit for post-emerge because that's my best post-emerge option. So I'll start out with Authority MTZ. Unless we've got some high pH, I'd start with Authority First, which has first rate in with the Authority. Then post-emerge, I like Raptor and Pursuit the best, but also Bassagran and Classic do a nice job too.
Well, once again, our weed of the week is Ladythumb. It's a member of the smartweed family, so just kind of think smartweed whenever you're talking about Ladythumb.
That's all the time we have for this week's weed, but there's more Ag PhD to come with Iron Talk next.
Iron Talk is brought to you by Case IH.
Advanced farming systems from Case IH helps producers be ready. AFS is less complex and built right into our equipment, and our team of dedicated specialists are here to keep you rolling. The world of farming is changing. Will you be ready?
The job of your planter's residue managers varies depending on your overall tillage program. We'll discuss in today's Iron Talk. One of the most important jobs of your corn planter this spring is to manage the residue that's in your field properly so your seed placement is perfectly even all the way across the field. If your seeds don't come up all on the same day, you're losing yield, as corn plants rising from the ground a few days before the seed next to it will completely rob the yield potential of that plant. We see it every year, and our farm is guilty as well. So what can you do? With conventional tillage, the goal of the residue managers is to simply push the root balls and residue out of the way. Be careful not to dig in too deep so as to create a trench. We saw that last year where farmers did dig in a trench, and in places that got good heavy spring rains, farmers often had to replant as the seed was washed away. In no-till, many farmers tend to dig into the soil just a little bit if there's a crust. Otherwise, if soil conditions are perfect, you only need to brush the residue aside. In strip tillage systems, yes, you do still need residue managers. Now, some of the residue from last year's crop will likely blow across your strips from last fall. So the big thing is, don't dig into the seed zone with tillage trying to get it out of the way. This is much like we discussed for conventional tillage. Just sweep the surface to get the residue out of the way and don't dig a trench. Finally, with all the tillage methods we discussed, make sure your residue managers sweep the residue far enough away from the row to get past your gauge wheels. If gauge wheels are jumping over the residue from time to time, you'll get a very uneven planting depth and yields will surely suffer. That's all for today's Iron Talk, and now back to the show.
Micronutrients are not optional for plants, they are essential. TJ Micromix is a profit-proven management tool that ensures the availability of essential secondary and micronutrients. Formulated as a dry granule or liquid, TJ Micromix is plant available, easy to mix and apply. The synergistic fertilizer mix delivers consistent yield response on a variety of crops by complementing an NPK fertilizer program. Maximize yield on your farm this season. Call TJ Technologies or your fertilizer dealer and get your TJ Micromix today.
There are more mouths to feed than ever before. What are farmers doing to meet the challenge? They're using agronomically designed equipment from Case IH. Our Quadtrac technology, soil management, and planting systems are designed to foster a better growing environment that helps farmers maximize yield potential. And our deep understanding of agriculture is preparing them for the challenges ahead. Will you be ready?
I'm ready.
Go to caseih.com to learn more.
Today's number is 3. You can see it everywhere, and it can stand for almost anything. But when it comes to protecting the nitrogen that feeds your crops, 3 is the special number that sets Nutrisphere N, Nitrogen Fertilizer Manager, apart. Because Nutrisphere N is proven to reduce all 3 forms of nitrogen loss, which adds up to keeping more nitrogen and yield where it belongs. So ask for Nutrisphere N, the stabilizer that fights nitrogen loss 3 ways.
For years, FarmLogic has been the easiest and most convenient way to keep up with your farming operations. Well, it just got better. Introducing FarmPad for your phone. You always have your phone with you, so entering records as they happen is as easy as a touch of a button. Chemical database, GPS, service records, and more. When you do it on the farm, save it on your phone and it's backed up forever. Call or visit farmlogic.com for a free trial and find out why FarmLogic is the best decision tool for the farm.
Closed captioning for Ag PhD is sponsored by Norwood Sales.
The all-new S-Cube commercial tender is the only tender on the market with poly tanks, giving you the capability to haul seed, fertilizer, water, or liquid fertilizer. Each cube can hold 300 units of seed, 2,000 gallons of liquid, or 300 cubic feet of fertilizer. Options include full functioning wireless remote, stainless steel conveyors, and self-contained hydraulics. Get yours today at Norwood Sales.
That's all the time we have for today's show, but be sure to join us again next time for another Iron Talk, Weed of the Week, Farm Basics, and much more. I'm Brian Hefty.
And I'm Darren Hefty. Thanks for watching Ag PhD.
What's so sweet about manure? Animals eating prairie grass and returning nutrients to the soil through manure is the way nature is intended to work. To learn more about manure and how farmers use it to raise crops, visit the Responsible Nutrient Management Foundation at rnmf.org.